Should I prime black? Should I prime white? Black, white, black, white, black, white, black and white. Black, white, black, white, black, white, gray. Yeah, that's it. That's the one I'm going to go with. Okay, welcome back. So today I wanted to go through the importance of priming a model, either black, white, or gray. And I have in front of you 3 colors that I chose. I didn't have an actual red, so I'm using Italian red from Vallejo Model Air, I should say. And I have blue and yellow as well. The importance of priming. What is primer? Primer is basically used so that you have better adhesion of the paint onto the miniature, whether the miniature is made of plastic, resin, or pewter. So you're supposed to use primer so that the paint itself will bond better to the miniature and that it won't chip off as easily. And to further protect it after you finish painting, you would usually seal the miniature. So in front of you here, I have a couple of examples. Obviously, I did one black and white because I wanted to show the difference as I painted through the whole thing. But I'm going to go ahead and choose a certain section of each model, and I'm going to paint all 3 of these colors just to show you the difference between black and white primers and what the gray does, what the neutral one does. People who prime in black usually prime in black as tabletop miniatures. I mean, you have professionals who prime in black as well. I was always told and taught when I was learning how to paint that if you wanted just a quick tabletop miniature that's painted really nicely, where you don't have to be so exact, you would prime it in black. And for the reasons being that as you're painting the miniature, if you leave out certain areas in the underside of, like, let's say the shoulder pad here or anywhere else, that it'll be kind of hidden and it'll kind of create a natural shadow that you won't have to do with ink washes or anything like that. So this way you can paint the models fairly quickly and you can get the table out or get the miniature out on the table for play. The overall end result will be that the miniature will be slightly darker as paint is translucent. You can actually see through the paint slightly, and the lights will actually bounce off the primer and then back out towards you. So the model itself will actually be a little bit darker. You prime white really to showcase and highlight the features on the model more than the black primer, so that the overall model looks brighter. So there's so it's not very dark, it's more colorful, and a lot of primed models that I did for showcasing or things like that, competitions, I usually prime in white. It's a little more difficult to use for tabletop in the sense that, again, like with the black primer in reverse, you're gonna have to get into all the recesses, because if you miss a spot all the way in the deepest areas on the inside of the model, it's gonna show. And so if you have a model that's painted blue or red or green, and then all of a sudden you're gonna have this ugly little white line or somewhere in there that you missed that is actually showing as white. So painting it in white can be a little troublesome, but your overall end result will be more colorful and brighter. This was just for me to just show as a test piece. And then there's gray. This is not the actual gray from the plastic. This is actual black and white primer mixed. I have the black and white primer that I put into a dropper bottle and I shook it up and made into a gray primer. And I actually brushed this one on. But they do sell gray primers and things like that as well. If you want something that's kind of in between, like a neutral where you kind of get the shading and the brighter colors but not as vibrant, then you can go with gray primer as well. I tend to stick with the black or white primers just because it's easier. The gray primer I sometimes use, but I rarely use, but I just wanted to put it out there so I can show you guys what the color will look like. So what we'll do is we'll start off with red. I have red on here already. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take let's say this right shoulder pad right over here, and we'll paint this with the red color. And you guys will see the difference. So when painting, one of the things that I will say is try not to do the entire piece in one go. You'd rather want to have the section painted multiple times. So water down your paints a little bit and then do it in 2 or 3 thin coats. So as I was saying before, that the paint is a little translucent, you guys can see that although I'm painting red, you can kind of still see the black showing through that, right? So I'm gonna leave this to dry, and then I'm gonna go move on to the white primered Scout Marine, and we'll do the same thing. We'll pick this color. Now with the white primer also, you're gonna find it much easier to paint colors such as yellows and obviously whites much easier off the white primer rather than the black primer. So depending on what color scheme you're going for, if you've got a lot of yellow on your miniature, then I would suggest priming white, because the yellow is gonna go on the white miniature much easier than the darker color. But as you can see, just off of the white primer, the color is gonna go on much nicer. It looks a lot colorful already, whereas the dark one looks kind of like drab. It kind of looks dark and muted. Okay, so the next one is going to be the black and white miniature. And the reason I chose this miniature, let me see if I can get the focus for you guys just a little better. Okay, the reason I chose this miniature is because what I'm going to do is I'm not going to paint obviously the shoulder pad because we have these 2 miniatures here. I'm going to paint across just so you can compare the 2. That's why I did this one black and white, so you can draw a direct comparison with the colors. So I'll just use the top section over here for the red. So this is 1 stroke right there. Okay, there's the direct comparison. We'll leave that to dry. And then here's the gray primer, or the black and white mix. Okay, and then we'll do the shoulder pad on this one as well. So with this one, you are going to see the darker gray underneath as well, but not as much as the black primered model. Okay. So let me just clean off my brush. We'll let these sit to dry. Let me just put them out in order so you guys can see the differences, and that's after 1 coat. Okay, so this one's pretty much dry, so we'll go ahead and do a second coat on this. So if you guys have any questions about black, white, or gray primer, you guys can ask down below as well. I'll try to answer it as best as I can to the extent of my knowledge. Okay, so that's 2 coats. Let me coat that a little bit heavier. So as you can see, coating in there's a piece of hair there. Coating in black primer and then painting vibrant colors such as red, and as you'll see later when we get to the yellow, it's going to be very difficult to get good coverage. Okay, but here's with the white primer. Okay, let's get a little bit of water mixed with the paint, and okay, so that's basically 2 coats right there, and you can see that the red is pretty vibrant. It's much more colorful than that, than the black primered model. And then again, direct comparison over here, side by side, that you guys can see. There's the second stroke. And then on to the gray model. Now with the gray model, it's not going to be as drab, as I said, as the black primer model. You'll still have a little bit of more colorful look to it, but not as vibrant as the white primer. Okay, so again, here's a comparison of the 4 with 2 coats. Okay, you guys can see the black and white one, the direct comparison there, that you can still see that black through the red paints of 2 layers, whereas the white, it's really hard to tell if there's white undercoat of primer or not. And then with the gray, the mixture, it's not as dark as the black. It's a little bit brighter than this one right here. I mean, it might be a little hard to tell, but for me, seeing it live, it's not as dark. Okay, so that was the red. So let's move on to blue, and I'll show you guys on the other side, on the opposite shoulder pad. what the blue looks like on all three or all four primed pieces. So let's get a little bit more paint. Okay. So let's flip the models around to the other side. Okay, and let's get the first coat down on the blue. Now with colors like blue, blue tends to cover very well. So usually painting it over black is not that big of a deal. Even though it's translucent, you can kind of see through it. It's a much darker color than the red, so it's not as colorful, I would say. So the black will actually tend to be hidden a little bit with the first coat. So there's the blue, and then here's the white. And then you guys will see the difference on the white. Now with blue on the white, you get the opposite effect of what the red had, where the blue covers, but you can still see the white through. So it's a little harder to get a clean coverage with the white primer with blue paint. Whereas with the black primer, you can hardly tell, right? So again, we'll do their comparison over here. This time we'll get a flat surface, so like we'll get the back over here. So that was one coat, okay? And then here's the gray primer. So with the gray primer, or the black and white primer, whichever way you want to look at it, it's less obvious than the white primer. And there's going to be the comparison of the four right there. Okay, with the black, it's really actually hard to tell that there's even blue on there. But with the white, you can definitely see the white through the blue paint. There's the comparison of the two, and then the gray. Okay, so we'll do a second coat on this as well. Now, a neat little trick while you're waiting for paint to dry in certain areas is to just lightly blow on the model or put the model next to a fan, so that way it dries a little quicker. So here's going to be the second coat over the shoulder pad here. Let's get a second coat over here on the white primered Scout. Now the second coat will help out in the sense that you'll get deeper coverage in areas like the blue. The white's not going to be as noticeable, but it's still there, right? You can definitely tell it's still there. And then here's going to be the comparison, okay? And then the gray. So this is still a little wet, so let's cool it off a little or let it dry. Okay, it's not quite dry yet, but for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm just going to go ahead and paint. Normally you would want to let it dry completely. Okay, so there is the second coat. Okay, so as you guys can see, there's a second coat on the four models, and you can see for yourselves that with the white still, even after the second coat on the blue, you can still see the white streaks in there. The red coverage, however, is pretty clean. You got full coverage after two coats, as opposed to the black primer. The blue, we gotta let that dry, but the blue's on there pretty well. It's a dark blue though, right? And then as far as for the red, you got streaks of black in there showing from the primer. Okay, and this is the direct comparisons of the red on the white and black primer and the blue paint on the white and black primer. Okay, and then here is the neutral gray primer. Obviously the blue still has to dry a little bit, so I'll show you this again later. And then here is the red. Okay, so moving on, what I feel one of two colors the most difficult to paint is yellow. Okay, white being one of them is the other color that's really difficult to paint, but yellow is a very difficult color to paint. So let's go ahead and do a comparison on these four models with, on the three different color primers, and then the one, black and white one for direct side-to-side comparison. Okay, so we will go ahead with the marine here, the black marine first. we'll do the top over here. We'll do the armor section. Now yellow on black primer is almost as bad as the red. So now I put on a pretty thick coat there. You guys can tell that's a pretty thick coat. A lot of it being water though, right? But you can definitely tell that the black is showing through. If I really wanted a thin coat, here's the thin coat. This is with me taking the bulk of it out, and that's just one layer of yellow. So it's almost like not painting it on it at all. And then here's the white primered marine or scout marine, and we'll put in one coat on top. For my opinion is that for yellow and red, white primer works the best, because you can tell even with one coat, you got pretty good coverage of that yellow there. And then on the direct comparison, we'll use the back over here. Yeah, we'll use this section. There's not a lot of white here, so I'll try my best to show you guys. Okay, so that's one coat of yellow. And then on the gray marine, I'm kind of half and half about yellow. I don't mind it, but I would still choose to do white primer for anything that I decide to paint yellow. So as you can tell, it's not as bad, right? So here we'll put them down in order again. Black was first, yellow second. The direct comparison I'll lay down this way so that you guys can see it. If he wants to sit, I'll actually hold it. And then the gray. Okay, so there's the direct comparisons. You can tell that with the black primer, you get a lot of black streaking showing through, as with the gray, a little bit less, and then the white is where it shows the yellow the best. Okay, so here we'll go with the second coat now. So priming something black to hide the shadows that you might miss, or areas that you might miss to make shadows. Black and yellow just don't mix. It's just really difficult to paint yellow on black. It's one of the hardest colors to paint. Even with white, I have a much easier time painting white over black primer than I do with yellow for some reason. Here is the white primer. That's the second coat. I don't even need to do that much to it. And then here's the black and white direct comparison, side to side comparison. And then here is the gray primer. Now, the thicker you lay the paint, the longer it's going to take to dry. The thinner the paint that you lay down, then the quicker it's going to dry, but the more coverage you might need. Personally, I would like to add like 2-3 layers of light layers, and then let them dry fairly quickly in between, so I get good coverage over the model instead of one thick layer that's cakey and it'll hide the details and etc. And it's going to take forever to dry. So there are the direct comparisons of just doing 2 strokes or 2 layers of the blue, red, and yellow. Let's go ahead with the black primered marine first. Here's the red with 2 coats. Here's the blue with 2 coats. Let's see if we can get maybe a little bit better lighting on that. But let me change the exposure setting for you guys to see a little bit better maybe. Okay, so that's the blue, red, and then the yellow. Okay. Now with the darker blue, I feel like on the black primer it works best. And then here's the white primered marine with 2 coats of red, 2 coats of blue, and then 2 coats of yellow. It's a little hard to see the yellow because I think I've overexposed the actual image to video. Okay, I'll tone it back down. Yeah, so you can still see the white streaks through the blue in the white primer, whereas the red, there's none there. And then with the yellow, there's a little bit, but you can go over that with maybe like a 3rd coat and it'll be done. And then obviously the direct comparisons of the red and then the blue and yellow. Okay, and then this is why a lot of people use neutral colors like a gray primer. Although you kind of get the best of both worlds in that the red isn't fully covered, but it's the black, the gray primer is not as streaky as the black marine, right? Same thing with the yellow. Obviously, it's not great coverage like the white, but it's not terrible like the black either. So you can probably add like 2 or 3 more coats and you probably might get better coverage on that. The blue, however, almost no streaks, maybe like a little bit towards the front here, but you could add 1 more layer and you'll get good coverage of the blue. And then you guys can tell, like I said, the colors of being more vibrant versus dull. The black obviously gets muted and it looks darker and more evil looking. If you want evil looking characters, right? Something like Corn Berserkers or something like that, you might want to go with the dark primer so that the overall model looks darker. Whereas with, like, let's say Blood Angels, maybe you want something really bright and vibrant. You want to go with the white primer because that'll really make the model stand out and really colorful. Or you could just go kind of neutral and go with the gray. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, that was me just using the primary colors of red, blue, and yellow. Obviously, for my personal use, I might cover this in another video, but I don't directly paint using just the main colors of red, blue, and yellow. What I mean by that is when I want to paint yellow, I'll actually add a layer of like light brown to the model first. Brown is a very good base over the primer, and then the yellow on top of the brown makes it so that the yellow coverage is much nicer and smoother than painting directly over let's say a black or gray. However, if you're doing like Imperial Fist or something like that, and your main color choice is yellow, then I would definitely choose a white primer so that you get most of the yellow on there. As far as for the blue, blue is a pretty good color that covers pretty well on all miniatures, with the exception of white in my opinion. So what I would do for a white primer is I would probably end up giving this model a wash of a darker color like Agrax Earthshade or Nuln Oil or something like that to kind of tone down the bright white a little bit, and then I would add the blue paint over that, and you should get fairly good coverage on that. With that, guys, I just wanted to just showcase to you guys the importance of choosing primer between black, white, or mixing it and getting gray. I use brush-on primer from Vallejo, which is acrylic surface primer, but you can use the spray primers as well, or airbrush it on. Either way, I just wanted to show the importance of choosing the proper primer before you start painting. Painting at the end is really, at the end result is what we want, but what people don't realize is it's the prep work and the thought of what primer to use, and eventually the next video I'll talk about assembly and mold line cleanup and stuff like that. But the prep work is really important for your final result piece to stand out. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys hit that like button and maybe even subscribe to my channel. Please follow me over on onto Twitch as well, where I do live stream 6 days a week, and you guys can see me paint live, and you guys can see me do exactly what I mentioned, which is doing the browns before the yellows and all the other base colors that I put on before the final base coat that I want to use for my miniature. So with that, I want to say thank you, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Take care.